Good evening, bitches, hoes, bitchettes, and federal agent mommy dummies monitoring me because I'm a queer in Trump's America. It's your favorite boy, LaCroix, and we're back with another episode of Jack's Library. Now, I know some of you are like, Jack's Library, is this new? No, it's just been like 6 months since the last one. A lot has happened in my daily life, as I've been extremely vocal about. The original plan was to make this show like once a month, and now it's going to be whenever I finish 3 books, because that just seems more timely. I'm getting a lot of reading done at work now, given that our hours are extended all the way until midnight, and we get like 1 to 2 sales per evening during those hours. So I'm back to whipping out the book and taking a look, if you know what I mean. There is a previous episode, but in case you don't want to go back and listen to that because you're listening to a podcast about things you could view with your eyeballs, this is the show where I talk about books, because I refuse to be that statistic of average Americans who only read 1 book per year. Please, God, we have to fight the anti-intellectualism in this country. I am begging you. Speaking of books, at least a portion of my audience is probably like, hey, where the fuck is Old Man Yowie Theater? And you know, that's a really good question. I got paid by somebody to read that novel on my birthday of last year, and I haven't been able to complete it again because of work. However, we are going to be getting back to narrations, Old Man Yowie Theater, all of that good shit, because I know there is a non-zero portion of my audience that just likes to hear me read things. They're the real freaks, not the people that ask me to call them slurs on Fansly. But without further delay, because I am currently recording this in a soundproof booth with no ventilation during one of the worst heat waves North Carolina has ever had, and I am sweating down to my nutsack, let's go ahead and get started by talking about Universal Harvester, a novel by John Darnielle. Universal Harvester is a book that I actually started on my way back from Adepticon when I saw Sean last March, which, shout out to Sean, we'll be running it back March of next year, I guess, and probably recording another episode of Black Spine at his lovely apartment. But it's a kind of thematic, I want to say like Americana or Southern Gothic novel about a group of people that live in a small town, and it kind of rotates around this video store where this young man that's in his 20s or 30s one day notices something weird come up on a returned video cassette tape. He at first thinks that he's hallucinating it, but then it keeps happening, and so he gets his manager involved, and then he gets his dad involved, and his father is kind of going through his own struggles because he realizes that his son is soon going to be leaving the nest, more or less, and he's already lost his wife, unfortunately, to a tragic illness, and that's kind of where the plot ends. And I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion. Universal Harvester is an extremely well-wrote novel that gives you a very real glance at what growing up in a town this size in the South is like. And I say that as somebody that has grown up in one of the smallest and poorest towns in North Carolina my entire life. I'm still here. I still like living here. This is a wonderful place if you just want kind of a safe place with a routine. But there's a certain flavor to that town of wanting to leave and wanting to escape that never gets fully realized for a lot of people. One of the running jokes of my city is that you either get trapped here or you leave. And it's not really a joke, it's the truth. It's something we all say kind of to cope with the fact that we stay for various reasons. In my case, I've got a house that's paid for and land here. I don't really want to fucking leave, even if it means surviving on poverty wages, knowing that with my education and my work history, I could probably get a pretty decent job in the big city. My roots are here, and I don't want to move if for no other reason than that's incredibly important to me individually. Eventually, one day, when I do pass from this mortal coil, I'm even going to have my ashes spread on my land because I genuinely don't want to leave. And Universal Harvester captures that element of the struggle between wanting to stay in this town and knowing there's better opportunities elsewhere. And that really is the plot of the novel. That's what this book is actually all about, regardless of what the author said in later statements. More on that in a moment. But we have this ongoing plot of this sinister video thing happening, right? And as the novel progresses, that's kind of never really far away, even though it focuses much more on the interactions between the characters and what they're doing and how they're trying to track this mystery but also disregard it. And in a lot of spots, it makes the novel feel kind of aimless because it has this artificial, tacked on, kind of sinister plot line that really ratchets the tensions up in some very mundane ways across the entire work without ever really executing on that plot point. It doesn't really go anywhere. And that is very much reflected in the actions of the character throughout the course of the work. More often than not, like, as soon as one of these creepy videotapes is shown to somebody, they're like, hey, I think that was filmed at this location, but hey, let's not go check it out. Let's stay home. Let's ignore the problem. Do you remember what I said about this novel is primarily about the tension between people wanting to give up the life they have for a life they could have? That's where a lot of this story happens. We're like, in a very real sense, life just happens sometimes and the dangers will come and really the only thing you can do is ignore it. But in the span of this work, they keep going back to these scary ass videotapes and this cult that this guy's mother was a part of, and it just kind of lies flat past a point. There's a couple of incidences in the novel that easily could have been like hooked back to these sinister videos and trying to reveal this ongoing plot about what happened to this guy's mother and like yada, 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 yada. And it just fucking never carries the point that far. It keeps going back in a very cyclical loop, which I imagine was John, the author's point, is that pain and trauma are cyclical, and healing in of itself is also, like, not linear. Like, you're not going to progress. Sometimes you're going to rise and fail, and that's just kind of how it is. But if you wanted to write a novel that was a drama about dealing with such topics, I feel like that would have been far more executed than tacking on this very artificial, if topical, stance of kind of analog horror and VHS tapes are scary and you never really know what you're grabbing at the video store. The story is very achronistic. There's very much kind of this struggle between the past and the future that is right there head on for our lead male character and all of the people he's associated with. And while I imagine, like, there had to be a point when John was writing this novel when it was just, like, about the drama of that, like, struggling to progress forward when you have such a deeply rooted past, and he just stapled on the fucking videotape idea. And that's not to say the novel is bad, it's just to say that another pass through a couple of editors might have really grounded this work more and made it a very interesting, very dramatic read about that piece of Americana that John Darnielle was trying to capture. So John himself says that this novel is about mothers, and I didn't really understand what the fuck he meant by that, because yes, the central plot point is around this guy finding out what happened to his mom, because surprise, it wasn't a terminal illness. She got involved with some freaky people, hence the videotapes and all this other stuff. But, like, at the same time, the mom isn't the central focus of any of the dramatic points of the novel. It all goes back to, I ain't got shit here, but the future is scary. So thank God I have this weird little mystery that I have to solve with my friends and my dad to keep me here still. And that's kind of the culmination of the work as well, is like, well, it's better to stay where you are, where things are familiar and you're comfortable. And I think that's a load of bullshit, dude. Like, my entire life as an individual, and your mileage as a reader might vary, has been accepting that change is constant. It is the only constant law in the entire universe. And either I gotta go with the flow and hold on loosely, or I'm gonna lose control. And this, for the culmination of this very dramatic work you have about dealing with internalized emotions, grief, trauma, all of this, to be, hey, just stay in that situation, is not just incredibly disingenuous to the good that change in your life can bring you, but is also, I feel like, incredibly dangerous rhetoric to just blast at your readers who may or may not be suffering under the same kind of tension. Universal Harvester is a weird fucking novel, and there's no real way to describe it other than that. It's not bad, but it's not great. Like, it has incredible writing, it has great drama, it has all of this stuff. I can't say that I would recommend it to anybody, though. Like, it's such a weird little book, but if you're into weird dramas and weird books, I could see you getting some value out of this. Next up, we've got The Rotting Room by Viggy Parr Hampton. To those of you who may have missed the first episode, there was a book in there that I could not stop ranting and raving about, and it was called The Starving Saints. The Starving Saints is an excellent novel. I really fucking enjoyed it. It was dark fantasy, it was horror, it was a bunch of things that melded together and made a taste that was just great, baby. So I was kind of on a like pseudo-religious horror kick after that, and I was like, oh, I've heard good things about The Rotting Room from like TikTok and other horror aficionados. Let me check it out. I was disappointed. Like, all right, let me pump the brakes just a minute and like explain why I didn't like this novel, okay? The Rotting Room starts with an incredibly interesting premise. You have this convent of nuns who are dedicated to holy decay. They literally have a room where they take bodies that have been donated or sisters that die in the convent and let them rot on these stools that have holes underneath them so they can bottle the ichor and sell it to the peasants. Now, we, the reader, are already incredibly grossed out by this, and for good reason. That is a disgusting premise by any stretch of the imagination, but it does harken back to actual historical practices used by the Catholic Church. There were a lot of times when dead bodies became holy, and touching them or obtaining of their sustenance or something like that would take all of your sins away and yada yada yada. If you're really curious about this practice, it's called indulgences, and it's something very interesting to read up about because it essentially is what allowed the Catholic Church to amass wealth and thus political power during this time period. Is it disgusting? Absolutely, but to a populace that was wholly illiterate unless they were a part of a non-secular order, say a group of nuns or a group of monks or something like that, you just kind of had to go with the flow, and you were living in this highly superstitious era when if the holy man was telling you this will take away your sins, well then why not give it a shot? Enter our protagonist, who is a nun that went through a very traumatic experience at another convent called the Raphaelites, where they actually started engaging in human sacrifice. She saw this happen and she was quickly spirited away to this convent of nuns that, despite this weird little habit, were wholly harmless. It's a bunch of old biddies. How on earth could they be sinister or scary in any way? So our protagonist tells herself that. She says that this convent is nothing like the Raphaelites and that they are surely, doing the work of the Lord and blah, 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 blah. Until a lady shows up that claims to be a nun from another abbey. She is demure. She is beautiful. She has red and golden eyes, which is your first cue that our lead protagonist is not the sharpest tool in the shed. So our lead protagonist meets this woman, speaks to her very briefly, thinks something is up, and the woman dies. So, of course, the sisters of this convent decide to go place her in the rotting room, except there's one problem. This bitch refuses to rot away. Every single day that passes as the sisters come and witness in the rotting room and pray for the souls of the departed, she looks better and better and better. Like, her face is more flush, her whatevers are doing well, and then shit starts happening, such as there's a peasant that dies at the gate after he buys a bottle of the corpse byproduct, right? And of course, all through this, our protagonist is starting to be like, man, this is some fucked up shit. This is some fucked up shit. Wow, maybe these bitches are evil. And she keeps doubting it the entire way until one night she's in the rotting room itself, and the sister who refuses to rot or die starts speaking to her when her back is turned. Now, we, the reader, of course, having common sense, are grabbing the bars of the cloister and saying, "Run, bitch! Run!" And of course, she chooses not to do that. She tells herself that it is God's purpose that she save this convent because she failed the previous one, which, okay, yeah, I guess that's a good reason to do anything. But at the same time, the devil's there. Like the devil from the Bible, the thing you read every day. So there's this entire part in the plot where she's trying to, get a letter to her father, and the nuns catch her the first time, and then she's like, well, I'm going to give it to the priest that has the hots for me that I give my confession to every other day or whatever. And so the priest takes it, and he's like, wow, she might be a little crazy. I might have to, go talk to the archbishop about how crazy this woman is. I will pray for her soul. So, of course, the nuns keep making the evil corpse juice, the zombie plasm or whatever, right? And they keep on drinking it. And so a lot of the nuns start to die, and then some of them start to get better. And the devil, you know, from the Bible, the thing she's reading every single day, keeps being like, no, you should just, like, give up. You should just, like, burn the place down. There's no hope for you. These women are wicked. Like, why don't we do that? And not gonna lie, it's kind of hard to disagree with the devil from the Bible. But at the same fucking time, she's like, no, I will save the nuns of this convent. With my total lack of common sense and my total inability to do anything for myself. Surely, I can't just, what's that? The door's open most of the day? Yeah, no, why would I ever go through the door? The fence is high enough for me to hop over? No, my habit will catch on the fence and then, you know, it'll rip, and that's a bad idea. So the novel proceeds into this absolute comedy of fucking errors of this nun trying to do the right thing and getting fucked up every time. And it's just like, holy shit, the woman, just go. Just walk. You know where the town's at. That's near this convent of nuns. You can go down there. You can change your clothes. There's a million things you could have done, but you just, you do the fucking Three Stooges act of, I'm gonna be fucking Superwoman and try to save the No! My biggest complaint with Universal Harvester is sometimes you just gotta ignore shit. And that is, I feel like that applies here. You need to ignore that the devil from the Bible. You need to ignore that feeling that if you pray to God enough, he will show the way. And you need to listen to the fucking lizard brain, hairless ape part of your mind that you are. And you need to get the fuck out. Like, there are so many parts of this novel where I was just like, just go over the fence. Just open the door. Just go this way. Things will be okay. I thought upon every fucking common sense decision that this woman would do that. Fool that I was to assume that this is what was going to happen. And so, of course, the novel culminates with everything she tried to do. She gets caught. The priest gets killed because the devil from the Bible knows that he has feelings for the nun. And then she winds up in the rotting room. She refuses to give up her faith and join the devil. They put the fucking zombie juice in her and she dies instantly. And that's the book. The Rotting Room is one of those examples of a fantastic premise with a great way to keep the tension high. And we placed it in the hands of fucking Leslie Nielsen. And I'm not talking like prime Leslie Nielsen, like Naked Gun 3.5 Leslie Nielsen. I'm talking Dracula Dead and Loving It Leslie Nielsen. I was astounded at the absolute abject stupidity of our lead character. Because there was just so many times you could have just used your brain for a fraction of a second and not fucking had to drink the zombie juice and become fucking a tyrant. Like, you could have just fucking... This novel had so much genuine potential, and that was the only reason I sat the entire way through it. And then as I got to the end of it, and our lead character was still being a raving dumbass about literally everything, I was like, oh, they're gonna find some super interesting way to, like, wrap it up here. They're gonna reveal that, like, God was with her the entire time, and, like, an angel comes down or something. Nope, she was just stupid the whole way through the book. Okay. Our final novel for this episode is one written by an author we actually featured on our previous episode. It's Rotten Tommy by David Sodergin? Yeah, that sounds right. If any of you listened to our previous episode or followed me on B-Sky or anywhere else, you've probably heard me talk about a novel called The Har, which was also wrote by David. The Har was a absolutely delightful novel about grief and working our way through that while using a giant goop monster to disintegrate people's penises. David has a real thing for ripping dicks off in books. Like, it happens in this book as well, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Rotting Tommy centers around Becky, who is an adult that was diagnosed as autistic later in her life, who is a screenwriter that, while her house is getting renovated, finds a trunk that has some tapes inside of it for a show that was made over 40 years ago called Rumplejack, which is, interestingly enough, around the same time her mother, who was a famous actress, went disappearing. So Becky, being curious, becomes obsessed with the tapes of Rumplejack, and she starts noticing that the tapes themselves begin to edit themselves in and out. She can't seem to find anybody that this relates to. She seems to notice, like as you, the reader, probably is, that the media itself has a life of its own. It's constantly evolving, changing, shifting, right before her very eyes on subsequent viewings. And if this sounds like an analog horror premise, you're completely right. David actually took all of his inspiration for this book from things like analog horror, Resident Evil, and some other stuff. So, I am going to go ahead and say that Rotting Tommy is probably not David's best work, and that is not just my opinion, but popular consensus. It is not a bad book, however. I think David is an incredibly talented and very funny, if I may be so honest, writer, and is somebody that both loves and appreciates horror, but also knows how to write it. As Becky continues her journey amidst her failing marriage and other things, she starts to notice that she's being stalked by this giant, doe-like figure called Rotting Tommy, who seems to be our novel's tyrant. Literally, it is a reference to Resident Evil 3's tyrant. The big guy that was hunting Jill all through the game. More or less, that's what Rotting Tommy is. He's a tyrant, taken straight out of the pages of Resident Evil. I feel okay making that comparison as well because Tommy acts like the tyrant from RE3. He kills everybody that gets in his path, there's all kinds of bloodshed and all kinds of crazy deaths as he uses a giant sledgehammer to get his victims, and what is going on is he is consistently trying to get closer to Becky. Now, we the readers, and Becky herself, are operating under the assumption that Tommy is an antagonistic force throughout the entire novel. As things progress, however, that is revealed to not be the case. There's not a lot of details that get necessarily explained in Rotting Tommy, and even the way that the novel handles this at the finale of it is literally with, well, sometimes things just happen. I don't necessarily have a problem with this as a reader because the novel itself revels in the absolute absurdity of a haunted children's television show causing a bloodbath. And when it comes to reading, we do have to suspend a certain amount of disbelief in order for the premise and the plot to make sense. As far as the main plot of Rotting Tommy, everything works out the way that you, a reader, probably will think it does, but in a very interesting, absurdist kind of black comedy way. I really like that about David's writing, and I'm very eagerly beginning his other bodies of work because the dude's got the sauce. There's really no other way to put it other than he definitely knows how to write these types of stories. But there's still a couple of details that would have been interesting to be expanded upon. Eventually, Becky and a love interest in the novel make it to the actual physical town of Rumplejack, which isn't on any kind of maps or anything like that. As they pull up, there is a giant corporation sign right there, and later when they try to escape the town, they are chased down by agents of this corporation. That's just never expanded upon. We have no idea who that corporation is or why they're watching this mysterious town that shouldn't exist and should have been a prop in a children's television show. One of the antagonists inside of the novel is a tyrant, much like Rotting Tommy himself, and is just straight up like a talking horse that gets his head cut off, and it's not explained why he's a talking horse. We never get the reason that these tapes are able to edit themselves and update the footage on the fly explained in any kind of way whatsoever. Stranger still, towards the end of the novel, Tommy himself is kind of portrayed as this guardian character for Becky, who is our lead protagonist. And we don't know why. He just kind of gets this weird redemption arc towards the end of the novel, and it's kind of revealed he's this guardian character, but we never get explained why Tommy in particular is so protective over Becky. It doesn't make any sense. I think that Tommy was kind of a metaphor for how people with autism feel that they have to mask, and when they do mask, they feel they are presented towards the public. I haven't heard David himself, who is autistic, comment or make any kind of mention as to that being the case, but it kind of feels like that's what it is for me. I feel like a lot of Rotting Tommy is a metaphor for dealing with autism as an adult, specifically an older adult. Now, I've not been shy about revealing my own issues with my neurodivergency here on air, and I don't think I ever will. talking about it and being open about it to the point where I have characters making jokes about it all over every broadcast kind of makes it easier for me myself to deal with. I'm a weirdo, I'm a creep, I'm a kooky kind of guy, and I would much rather do that than feel a need to mask for a public that doesn't understand me. And towards the end of the novel, Becky gets that piece where she doesn't have to mask anymore, and it's something that it's mentioned several points within the novel that she has extreme difficulty masking and she feels like nobody understands her, etc., etc. So, what would I rate this novel compared to the other two books we've read? If you're going to read anything that I covered here today, Rotting Tommy is very good. It's a fun, pulpy monster mash of a novel, and especially if you can handle the extreme gore, the novel is very satisfying, and honestly, it's pretty funny, like I said. David's got the sauce, and that's why I'm starting to read his other books. There's a pretty good chance the next time I record one of these, it's going to be an all David Sodergern episode. A lot of his works are extremely Scottish, and I don't say that as an insult. I say that because I know I have a couple of international listeners and stuff like that who will probably appreciate how close to that kind of culture a lot of David's works are. The horror especially really tapped into this to the point where there's accurate dialects and stuff like that. But overall, I can't say it's a super deep novel. And I can't say that if you're one of these people or one of these readers who doesn't like to use their imagination to draw their own conclusions, you're going to walk away satisfied. It's definitely a book where you have to do a little bit of headcanoning, and I think that's okay. This has been Jack's Library. Tune in inevitably when I record another one of these, hopefully in a smaller time frame now that I'm getting multiple days off instead of just like one, where I have to run around and do errands for my entire family. I've been Jack, and hey, go check out all these books. Even if I said they suck, they might not suck for you. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Go read something.